Janet Wright. I want to tell you about iNaturalist. iNaturalist is a terrific resource for anybody who's in conservation or environmental education or field biology or anybody who just loves to learn about nature. What you can do with iNaturalist is iNaturalist allows you to add your nature observations to a worldwide database, a huge database, and then you can access all those observations from anywhere to do things that you already want to do, except you can then do them better with iNaturalist. Let me give you some ideas. For instance, you could use iNaturalist to catalog the biodiversity of a park that you're particularly interested in or a piece of property that you think needs to be protected. You can use iNaturalist to find where and when to hunt for native fruits that you might want to harvest. You can use iNaturalist to monitor the changes and the progress of a habitat restoration project if you're involved in that. You can use iNaturalist to help kids learn about the living things that are in their yard or their school grounds or their favorite beach. Or you can just use iNaturalist to meet people who are interested in the same things you are, those lichens and snakes and spiders, so that you can get together as a community and work on things that you all like to learn about. So that's the why of using iNaturalist. Now let's talk about the how. We're going to start today with the basic building block of iNaturalist, which is entering an observation. The most direct way to do this is with a cell phone, so we're going to start with that. Well, I'm out here in the field and I'm ready to make some observations for iNaturalist. So I've already done a couple of things before I got here to get ready for this. One is I downloaded the app, the iNaturalist app, to my cell phone. It's free. And then I opened up the app and I created an account with a username. And that username is going to be what people will see when they see my observations on iNaturalist. So now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to make an observation. I just need to find something to work on. And it can be any living thing. Any living thing is fair game. Could be an animal or a plant or a fungus. Or it could even be just an evidence of something living, like a track or a nest or an egg. But I'm standing right beside a good observation here, so that's what I'm going to do for my first one. Okay, here's my iNaturalist app. Let's move in close so you can kind of see the front page. And the very bottom of that, there's a camera icon, and that's what I'm going to hit first. That's an observe icon, and that'll get me started. So that opens up my camera, and now I move in on my subject, and I can frame it, zoom in and out on it by pinching and spreading, and take a picture. If I don't like the picture I've taken, I can retake at this point, but if I do like it, I'll just hit next. Now I'm going to move to the next screen, and here's the photo that I took. But if I'd like to add another one at this point, I can just go back to the camera. Let's get one now that shows the leaves of this plant. Go to next. And now I've got those two photos for that observation. And that looks pretty good. What iNaturalist does next is it says, what did you see? If I know what I saw, I can tap in there and the keyboard will come up and I can just type in either the scientific name or the common name. But if I don't know what it is, all I have to do is tap in the space and iNaturalist will make some suggestions for me. I can learn more about each of the suggestions by tapping the little information button. But once I find one that I like, I just tap that suggestion and that gets automatically entered as what I saw. Don't worry at this point too much about whether the identification is exactly right, because there's going to be plenty of opportunity to revise it later on. Now there's some important information that needs to go, additional information for that observation, when the observation was taken and where. Those are both really important, but because I took this with my cell phone, they've been filled in automatically, which is great. If they weren't filled in, I could just tap in each of those spaces and type in the information. Then, if I'm a little uncomfortable about showing the exact location of this observation, I can go to this geoprivacy choice and choose, instead of open, I can choose obscured. And that'll show a ballpark sort of location but not the exact location of this observation when someone looks at it on iNaturalist. Okay, I've entered all the information except if I'd like to add some notes, maybe about what the behavior of an animal was or what the habitat of a plant was. I can do that. I'm going to say this is in wet woods or pine savanna or whatever I'd like to do for a description. And then down at the bottom, I'm ready to go, so I hit share. And watch, it's grinding, it's sinking, and there it goes. It's going online, and it'll take just a minute. And bingo! Now the observation is on iNaturalist. If I hit it, there's all the things that I put in, including showing it on a map. And so at this point, it's been added instantly to that great international database, and my aunt in Australia or my coworker in Colombia can both see it right now. That's my first observation. So we've done it. At this point, once you've made your first observation, you've become part of the great international community of iNaturalist, which is a great community to belong to. So let's go out and observe. We'll be continuing this lesson indoors, but this would be a great time to pause for a minute and go outside and practice what you've learned by making an iNaturalist observation yourself. You'll be glad you did. Well, making observations in the field with iNaturalist on your cell phone is fun and it's informative, but you're not going to get the whole goodie out of the iNaturalist resource until you go to the iNaturalist website, iNaturalist.org. So for the rest of this session, that's what we're going to be doing. We'll be indoors, and I'll be sharing my computer screen with you to show you some of the features of the iNaturalist website. So we're going to go to iNaturalist.org. And I'm going to be showing you how to add an observation from the website. And then after that, we're going to explore the two features of iNaturalist that make it really unique as a nature resource, the combination of being a database of observations and a community of naturalists. So we're going to head over to the website. Here's what it looks like when you first get to it. And then we're going to log in. I'll log in with my credentials. And here's what it looks like when you get there. Now, this is what it looks like this moment, but like logging onto Facebook or Instagram or a lot of other sites, what you see when you first get there is different every time, and it's different for every person. This is called my dashboard, and there's a great deal of stuff here that I can use. But for right now, all we're interested in is this button right here, Add Observations, because I want to show you how to add an observation to iNaturalist using the website. First, let me say a little ad about why it is you might want to do that, because after all, we were out in the field and it was pretty easy to add an observation right when we were standing beside our subject. But there are a lot of other ways that you could get photos into iNaturalist. For instance, I went to South Africa in 2002 and visited an elephant park, and I still have a lot of digital photos from that, and they might be great on iNaturalist if I could provide the time and place that the photos were taken. So I could do that from my computer. A lot of us don't take photographs in the field with a cell phone. We prefer a camera, maybe a fancy single lens reflex camera or some other kind. And we can transfer the photos from the camera to the computer and then load them up to iNaturalist. And then I still prefer taking most of my photographs in the field with my cell phone, but I don't like to take the time to add all the information and upload them to iNaturalist in the field. So I typically just take a whole bunch of photos when I'm outdoors, and then when I come back in, that's when I add them to iNaturalist. So those are the reasons that you might want to do this. Let's go back to the dashboard page and click this Add Observations button and see what happens. Okay, I get to this bin page where I can load photographs in. I can drag and drop them right onto this page, or I can click this Choose Files button and go out onto my computer or into the cloud wherever it is that my photos are kept, and drag them back into that bin page. I want to show you the photos that I'm going to go get. I was out in a salt marsh, and I took a couple of pictures of a little snake that I found there. So these are the ones that I'm interested in uploading. I'm going to click this button, and I think the way Zoom operates, you won't be able to see me going out to get the photographs, so I wanted to show them to you first. So I'm going to click this button, go out and find those 2 snake photos, and bring them in. And then we switch to this page. This is the Add Observations page. And you can see the 2 photos that I just showed you, but each one is in a little card on that page. And if you look closely at the card, the information that's down below the photo is pretty much the same as what we saw in the cell phone in the field. There's a slot for the species name. There's the photo, the slot for the species name. There's the time that the observation was taken. There's the location of the observation. And there's a place for notes down here. And that's true for each of the photos that I uploaded. So I can fill in that information. The time is already there on this one, but the location is not. So I'm going to click there and put, I happen to know it was Ocean Springs. So I'll put that in, update the observation, and now that location information is loaded. I'm going to say that I found this in the salt marsh, if I could spell found. And then all I need is the species name. Now I can click on that blank and get the same suggestions from iNaturalist that I would have gotten if I were out in the field. But in this case, I'm going to go about getting the name a slightly different way. So I'm just going to write in snakes because I want to give that a little bit more research. So I'll just put snakes in general. This observation is now ready to upload to iNaturalist. It's got all the information that we need. But I really wanted to add this other photo to the same observation. I don't want to make that a separate observation. So that's easy to do. I just slide it over and it becomes part of the first observation. So now this says this is number 1 of 2 photos. And if I click on the side button, I can see the other one. So they're now both in the same observation. If I had uploaded maybe a dozen pictures, I could collapse them into 3 or 4 or 5 observations and have them all ready to upload at once. Okay, so I'll be going over to this Submit Observation button, and I'll click on that to get to add the observation. Let's go there now. It says Saving Observation, going to your observations, and here's a list of all my observations, and then my little snake one is on the very top. If I click on that, I come to its observation page with all the information that I just loaded. Let's check and make sure it's all there. It says snakes, which is what I just wrote in to identify it. And then it says that I'm the person who uploaded it. It says when it was observed. It shows a map of where it was observed, Ocean Springs. And then, this is really cool. Here's my notes down below that. And below that is a section called Activity. Just as you can comment on things in social media, you can comment on these on all the observations that are made in iNaturalist. There's a comment space. You can say anything you want about it. Although people in iNaturalist are very civil to each other about what they say. Or you can suggest an identification. So maybe I could get some help from somebody with an identification here. So this observation it's already there. It's up as part of the international database of observations, but there are many changes that could be made to it at this point. So that's how we add an observation. Let's go back here to my little summary slide, and I'll point out that we added the observation. Now let's see how we can use that big database of observations to help ourselves out a little bit with the identification of that snake. We're going to go back to iNaturalist at my dashboard, and we're going to look at a feature up here at the top, which is the Explore tab. The Explore tab is your portal to get into the big international database of iNaturalist. So we'll click on Explore. And here we are in the database. Whoa, look, there are 46 million observations in iNaturalist. So I told you it was a big database. And we want to find out if we can get some information about what that snake might be. Well, the way you use a database, you probably know, is you add filtering information to get to the information that you want to see. So we'll use these blanks to do that. The first blank up at the top says species, but it doesn't really mean you have to name a particular species of snake. You can put anything in there that describes the group that the snake belongs to. Let's just put snakes. And if we click on that, we'll go from 46 million observations, now to a mere 397,000 observations, which is a lot fewer, but it's not going to help us very much because that's still too many. Well, I live in Jackson County, Mississippi, and that's where I found this snake. So let's see how many observations of snakes people have made in Jackson County, Mississippi. I'll put that in the location blank. And now, we've gotten down to 297 observations. That's a lot more manageable. And we could look through these 297 observations to see if somebody has found a snake like mine in Jackson County, Mississippi. But we can also look at the next tab over, which says that there are only 24 species of snakes in those 297 observations. So let's click on that and see what we get. Whoa, now there's just a portrait of each of the 24 species of snakes found by iNaturalist observers in Jackson County, Mississippi. And each one of them is shown, and they start out with the one that's been observed the most, going down to the one that's been observed the least. And my little snake had stripes on it. Do you see some snakes with stripes here? I can see 3 different species: the eastern ribbon snake, the salt marsh snake, and the common garter snake. So it's quite likely that my snake is one of those because of all the observations that have been made in Jackson County, Mississippi. Those are the 3 stripy ones. In fact, if I look even closer, I click on these and get more information about them, I can probably narrow it down to the very species. Personally, I think it was this one, the salt marsh snake. So I'm going to remember that name, go back to my observation, and down here in the activity for suggest an identification, I'm going to put salt marsh snake. It's actually coming up with a subspecies of the salt marsh snake, which probably is right. So I'm going to choose that. And now and I hit done. Having done that, I go back up to the top, and I should see, yep, sure enough, it changes the identification to the Gulf salt marsh snake. That was pretty slick. I used the database features, using the Explore tab, I used the database features of iNaturalist to make myself a little field guide of the 24 kinds of snakes that I might find in Jackson County, Mississippi, and I matched it to the observation that I had. But even though I think I might have the identification right now, I'm not really a snake expert. So is there anything more that I can do to make sure that I've got the right species? Let's go back to the little graphic here. I've already consulted the database. Let's try hooking into the iNaturalist community and see what they can do for us in terms of identifying that snake. The community is a really interesting group. I'm going back to these snakes here, but if I go back up to the top of the page, instead of Explore, which got me to the database, if I go over here to Community and click on People, I'll see that community of iNaturalists. There's over 1 million of them, and the ones that are shown here are called recently active. That is, these are the people who probably were active within the last minute. No kidding, within the last minute. So if I come back a minute later and click again, I'll get a different set of people. And these are their own portrait pictures that they've put up. So we've got some pretty clever ones in here that may or may not be actually the individuals themselves.
Those are all the community members that we might have available to tell us about this snake, but how do we know which ones to ask? Well, let's go back to our snake set. Remember, there were 24 species of snakes seen in Jackson County, Mississippi, and of those, there were 141 people who helped identify them. Let's look at those identifiers. Here's a whole list of identifiers, and they're in priority order. The person who's done the most identification of snakes in Jackson County, Mississippi is number 1, a person named Bobby Fingers. That's probably not his real name. That's probably just his iNaturalist ID. And the second most helpful identifier is an iNaturalist named Evan Grimes. And we could go on down the list. There are several of them. And what we know about these people is that they probably know something about snakes in Jackson County, and they're also willing to help identify what those snakes are. So I'm going to write down those 2 top names, Bobby Fingers and Evan Grimes. I'm going to go back to my snake, down to the comments, and I'm just going to put in a little comment that will call one of them up and ask them to take a look. Let's try Evan Grimes. Like you do in Twitter, you put an @ before the person's name. So let's put @Evan Grimes. Can you help ID this? That's all we need to do, and we'll send it. The next time Evan Grimes, oops, done. Okay, yep, it's done. The next time Evan Grimes logs in and he looks at the upper right-hand corner of his dashboard, he'll see a little number 1 here that's showing that we sent a comment, and he'll check it out, find out what we've asked, and supposedly help us with the observation. So that's our introduction to iNaturalist. We've added an observation using the iNaturalist.org website. We've used the database, the huge database, to get more information about snakes to help us identify the little snake that we had. And we've tapped into the community of iNaturalists to get some more expertise and maybe some personalized interaction about the particular observation that we made. There's lots more that you can do with iNaturalist. And if you go up to not just the Explore part and the community part, but the More tab, you'll see tons more information to help you get the most out of iNaturalist, including help guides, video tutorials, and lots more. But actually, the best way to get more out of iNaturalist, go out in the field and make some observations. So I hope you'll enjoy doing that. And if you feel like tagging me on your observations in the comment space, I'm @Janet Wright, and I'd be really interested in seeing what you add to iNaturalist.